I've been thinking about doing a series on examples of confusing nomenclature in science for some time. I'm going to start with opioid receptors because this one confused me for quite a while. As you're kind of growing up and learning about science and how things are named in it, you kind of assume that it's systematic and descriptive. But as you soon learn about the practice of science itself, things are much more haphazard in its nomenclature than they would first seem. I think this is supported by the fact that the first time you really learn about how things are named in science comes in chemistry, where the IUPAC names everything. So for example, one of your first exposures is the periodic table, which is itself systematically organized, and then the IUPAC decides exactly what name should be assigned to elements, and there's a sort of central body that decides everything and makes sure everything is fair and makes sense. And IUPAC also defines how we should name both organic and inorganic compounds. So for example, I can remember in grade 10 naming ionic compounds, and it was very systematic. You had the first word, the second word, and then some Greek prefix or whatever. And then as you go on to organic chemistry as well, there's this whole elaborate set of rules, and you spend a lot of time learning about how you should name organic compounds, all following again this set of IUPAC rules. In general though, things work a little different in biology than they do in chemistry and physics, something which I think I'll get into in part 2 of this series. But that brings us to the opioid receptors. When you're first learning about these kinds of things, I think it's fair to assume that the name of a receptor or whatever kind of implies its natural function in a biological system. So with the opioid receptor, the first thing I think of when I hear the word opioid is opiates, as in opium, as in like morphine, heroin, etc. That left me wondering, like, why would our brains have developed this receptor just to get addicted to opioids, right? Because that's, you know, the name, it's the receptor for opioids. What's the point of that? But the nuance I didn't pick up on for a while is that certain endogenous neurotransmitters are also considered opioids, including endorphins, which you may know about, and a few others. But the name opioid sticks to describe both opiates derived from like morphine and related compounds, as well as the endogenous opioids like endorphins and others, all because of the order in which we discovered things, and we don't really tend to go back and rename things. This kind of problem with naming receptors for things that we don't really want binding onto them also carries over to viral receptors in cells. Again, oftentimes these will be named for a virus which binds to them rather than their actual function. Because oftentimes we don't really actually know the actual function of a receptor for a virus in a cell. All we know really about it is that it is where a virus binds. An example of this is with the recent news a couple of years ago, I forget exactly how long ago, of the use of CRISPR in babies. A scientist in China removed or somehow disabled the gene for a receptor HIV uses. And we don't actually know what the real function in the human body of this receptor is. So that's, among many reasons, one reason why what he did could be considered very unethical, because we don't actually know the impact of that on those children as they grow up. As one more side note before I end the video, an example of a viral receptor for which we do know the function is the ACE2 receptor, to which beta coronaviruses like SARS and MERS bind. That one actually plays a big role in regulating blood pressure, and a lot of drugs target it to deal with and modulate blood pressure issues.